Alrighty guys, welcome back to another one. In today's video, we're putting together a plain, simple, old 8 pellet triple aught buck shell. Now I'm using 35 caliber here. Triple aught buck is generally 36 caliber. However, 35 cal is often used by the factories. Hornady, if you buy a Hornady buckshot for, as a component, not loaded shells, it is 35 caliber. The little box is a 5-pound buckshot. Yeah, Hornady is 35 cal triple aught. So that's what I'm using here. Now, like I said, this is just a plain, simple 8 pellet load. We're doing this in 2 3/4 inch, and for the hull, it's just a Federal Top Gun. Nothing special. This one is at least twice fired. You can see the crimp is getting a little bit toasty, but the hull's still going good and strong. I have it already deprimed and resized and reprimed with a Pellet CX2000 because that's the primer everybody has right now. I've actually seen people with Winchesters and Federals lately. Those have been available for about a year now, but very limited. They're hard to get still, but Pellets and Rios are readily available, so Pellet primer it is. Why am I using 35 caliber? Well, because 35 cal is the biggest buckshot size you can still fit inside of a wad. And for the wad, I'm using a Winchester WAA-12R, the original red wads. If you don't have any Winchesters, well, use the Claybuster CB1138 wad. It's a clone of this, and that works too. It works just fine. Now, I was wanting to use a tapered hull for this. This is an original Winchester AA, the compression formed ones, not the HS. These are the old style. And they fit, the 35 cal, they did fit by 2s in the wad, but it was a little bit too tight for my liking. It didn't bulge the hull out, but you turned it upside down and shook it, beat it off your hand, they weren't coming out, and to me that's just a little bit too tight. You run the risk of ripping the hulls up, and you really don't want to rip up hulls like this, these old school AA's, which you can't get anymore. You got to buy them as once fired, or if you're lucky, you run across a box of still loaded ones, but even those are hard to come by these days, and I just don't want to mess up these hulls. If you're shooting an STS or a gun club, yeah, by all means, go for it, but I just didn't want to ruin this hull. That's all it was. A little bit too tight for my liking. So instead, I'm going with a straight wall Federal Top Gun hull, which is all good and well. This will work just fine. The only thing we have to do to get around using a tapered wall wad in a straight wall shell is use a 1-inch square piece of paper towel underneath the wad to stop powder migration. That's all you have to do. Otherwise, this wad will absolutely work in a straight wall shell. Done it many times. You can actually get 10 pellets in here easily, but the crimp won't turn out that nice. The stack height is just a little bit too tall, but it'll crimp nonetheless. It just won't be pretty. And it gotta be pretty. Still shoots the same. For an 8 pellet load, you will need an overshot card. That's one more component we're using. And lastly, Ballistic Products BSB buffer. This used to be ITX, but it's been rebranded to BSB, and thanks to Martin, I actually have a can of the BSB buffer now. It's the same thing as ITX. It looks just like the mix number 47, except it has shiny flecks in it. I think this is mix number 47 buffer with mica wad slick in it. If I'm wrong, correct me. I think I failed to mention powder, but we're using 28 grains of Hodgdon long shot. This will propel this shell up to about 1220 FPS in our experience. So nice speed, although with these large pellets like this, you don't need all that high speed. The pellets are large enough, they're going to carry some energy a lot farther than the smaller pellets will. Double aught buck up through 375 cal quad buck, you don't really need a whole lot of speed with those larger pellets. However, that being said, I am absolutely guilty of loading up the hottest, fastest shells you can imagine. I do have Magnemitis. Alright, there's our 28 grains of long shot. As always, double check it. And yes, we have 28 grains. Now, to get the wad in, well, good trick to do, since I don't have the wad guide set up on either press, take a pair of wire cutters and flare that hull out, just like that. Give it a little bit of a bell, set the paper towel over it, If you have wads meant for straight wall shells like this, target style wads, you don't need to worry about the paper towel, but this is meant for a tapered hull like a AA or STS gun club. So you will need to use the paper towel if you're using tapered wall wads. So here's the 35 cal pellets. This load is right at 1.25 ounces with buffer. Without it, I think it's a 1.2 ounce load. We'll see here in a second. But the stack by twos just fine. Now you can't really see it. So 6 of these pellets fit inside the shot cup. So 6 is going to have a really tight group, and 2 of them may be a little bit spread out from the group, but that's fine. We are at, 1.2 ounces even. And guys, this is the first time I'm using the BSB buffer on camera. I've loaded a few shells with it already off camera, but this is the old ITX. You can see the difference in the two. The product is the same though, the label just changed, that's it. This is my favorite buffer that Ballistic Products makes. It's actually my favorite buffer, period. It's a little bit more expensive than the mix number 47 or original, but it works really well. It seems to coat the wad and the pellets a little bit, which should, in theory, slicken them up a little bit. Less friction. It should lower pressure a little bit, especially if you, well, I'll show you, hold on. What I was getting at is the whole idea behind the mica wad slick stuff, which I think is in here. Well, you see this wad right here? It's right out of the bag. If I take it and drop it inside this thing of buffer here, and this is the BSB buffer, works the same with ITX, and just roll it around and coat it, knock off the excess, you can see this wad now has a coating of that buffer and what I believe to be the mica powder on the plastic, and it should in theory reduce friction, which should again in theory reduce pressure. Don't know about that, correct me if I'm wrong, but that does seem to make sense to me. That's the whole claim behind the mica wad slick. It makes loading wads into shells easier, especially the once fired hulls. They get a little bit crispy inside. It seems to be pretty cool stuff. I've never used the mica wad slick myself, but I might have to get a jar of it. I've also seen claim that the mica wad slick can increase velocity just a little bit. But anyway, let's get our buffer in. Like I said, this was a 1.2 ounce load without the buffer. There's 1 scoop. There's another 3/4 scoop, so 1 3/4 scoop so far. And that looks like it's going to be the proper amount. I'm using the Lee 2.2 cc dipper. And yes, the top roll of pellets is peeking through, and it's not settling down any more than that. We are exactly right with the buffer. So the Lee 2.2 cc dipper, you need 1 3/4 scoops of it. Now for a 12 gauge overshot card, this is 70 thou. Set that right on top of your pellets and buffer, and that's going to bring us up exactly where we need to be to fold crimp this. This has an 8-point crimp on it. So front station of the Lee load-all, you want the crease between the 2 points facing you. Final crimp. Tell me that ain't great right there. Great looking shell. By the way, the total payload weight with the buffer and overshot card, I guess, but those weigh nothing, is exactly 1 1/4 ounces, 1.25 on the scale. So use a powder charge for a 1 1/4 ounce load here, and you should be good to go. At least using the AA 12R wad or the Claybuster CB1138. I see a lot of people out there knocking the Lee load-all, saying it can't do good crimps at all. It's a piece of junk, waste of time, waste of money. Would rather use a sharp stick than the Lee load-all. Guys, in what world right there is that a bad crimp? I'm not praising the Lee or anything. Yes, it's a cheap press. Yes, it's plastic. Yes, it likes to lean forward sometimes. Yes, it's not the most sturdy thing. But it does a really, really good job for not a lot of money. I actually get this question all the time. Why don't I use mech presses? Well, I have. I like mechs. I have nothing against them. I just think the Lee is easier to use. It's all by feel. There's no adjusting anything. Say you have a AA haul, and well, some of them aren't. AA hauls aren't always the same length all the time. Some are a little bit longer than others, and to make up for that, you have to adjust the pre-crimp and final crimp stations on a mech. On a Lee, it's all by feel. You don't have to do that. You don't have to set up your press for different shells, different length hauls. There's none of that. The Lee is just easier to use for me, and I can load 8 different gauges on one press. And not just 8 different gauges, I can load all shell lengths down to about 2 1/4 inches just by trimming off 1/4 inch of the final crimp tube. Yeah, I can take it down to a 2 1/4 inch haul up to a 3 1/2. So all available shell lengths and even some non-standard shell lengths on one press. Also, getting OMV dies that make better than factory style crimps is a lot cheaper than buying a mech and whatever gauge you're trying to load. This is, I think, $86 the pre-crimp, and this is the middle crimp station, the dome crimp. It's about $30, I think. That's a lot cheaper than buying a mech. Even taking into account the crimp finisher like I got BN2 or something, even that is still cheaper than buying a mech for these 2 dies and the finish crimp. And these dies and the finish crimp allows me to get better than factory style crimps or something you can get off a Lee or a mech, Ponsness Warren, any press. These do a much better job. And just an example here, and yes, I know I'm on a tangent, but for loading small bores, these dies right here are really the way to go. This is a 2 3/4 inch 28 gauge, and that is a, to me, better than factory looking crimp on here. This is a 32 gauge, really nice crimp on it. 32 gauge mini 2-inch shell, and here is a 3-inch 410. Look at the crimp on that. All cheaper than buying a mech or a Ponsness Warren. It's just easy. Basically, it comes down to I'm cheap and I don't have room for a bunch of different presses. But anyway, guys, I think that's going to do it for me. I know I got kind of off topic there for a while, but anyway, please like and subscribe. We always appreciate that. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section below and we'll get back to you. And if you want to, go check out our Patreon. It's as low as $1 a month and you guys get early access to content. A link to that, as well as a link to our Instagram and Rumble accounts, will be in the description below. But other than that, you guys take it easy and we'll see you in the next one.